you for everyone for joining today. I'm looking forward to sharing some life wisdom as it relates to service and, of course, responding to other questions that may relate to professional medicine or other professions with which we can be um, of service. Notice that operative word again, in sharing with you sort of my life journey and how I get involved in a broad range of service opportunities based on a drive that I have to continue to want to give back to society in different ways. And I know we'll talk more about that throughout our discussion.
Sounds great. Let's get, I guess, right into it. Before we do, just on the logistical side of things, everyone, if you have questions, we'll be answering bulk of questions. So as the last 30 minutes, we're just gonna drop them in the chat. If you would actually want to say your question, just say I have a question in the chat, and then we'll unmute you as it goes. As it goes on. But first things first, I wanted to hit the point of what inspired you to pursue a career in student learning. We kind of talked about this previously in our meeting before this, but you had a transition over to it. And I thought it would be great to share with everyone here kind of your journey and what inspired you to make that transition and continue doing it. You've been doing it for 30 years and had huge impacts in educational space, but also doing business endeavors and also diversity ones, and would love to get into that.
Well, it's going to be an exciting story, and I hope everyone has about 12 hours. I know we don't have that. That's my first bad joke. Get ready. But seriously, my course in life actually started out in wanting to be a doctor, to be a physician. And I had this vision that I was going to be this wonderful physician that would just spend time with patients, help restore their wellness, and I would be sacrificial with my time. It would always be on the go. I'd be that classic doctor that everyone looks to for guidance and also, of course, for their health care. And through a series of transitions that occurred both at my undergraduate level in college and then ultimately graduate work at Howard University College of Medicine, that journey changed. It literally changed from the context of being the actual physician to one who teaches and mentors and inspires physicians, not just for their excellence in medicine, but most importantly for their calling to service. And a brief story just related to my faith tradition. I was at a Bible study at my church, and I was sharing some of my life journey of how in the world did I get to Georgetown School of Medicine and teaching and education and working with students who often become physicians.
Yeah.
And after I shared that journey of all these twists and turns, a minister looked at me and he said, "You know what? God didn't design you to be the king, but the king maker, and by extension, the queen maker." He says, "Do you really understand?" And I said, "No, explain to me more." He said, "Well, you always had this thought, this passion, this idea that you were going to be the great healer, if you will, of the land. That God would help you do that, to heal people, to bring them together, and that gives back joy and happiness. That's how you saw your life. That if you could bring people together through healing and also through good advice on their health, people will be happy. But God had a different plan for you. He said, no, that's not going to be your actual journey in life. Your journey in life will be you will actually inspire and train the exact type of people that you would want in medicine, meaning what you thought you were going to do, you will actually train those wonderful people. So by extension, you're the trainer of kings and queens. So how does that look? He says, your influence that you thought was just going to be you, in fact, through your passion and your skill sets, it'll actually be through multitudes of people who will share the same vision. And then he said, do you accept your calling in life? And I was like, wow. I was about 12 years removed from actual medical school, if you will, and was in the early part of my career of medical education, because I always felt like I had to use this information that I learned and I desired, and I still want to do something in healthcare. And that's when I really began to understand that I always had this passion for sharing information. And in my family, there's a long line of teachers. So that's the teacher part.
Yeah.
I always want to give in the way of maybe health and wellness, but wrapped up in there is a lot of just basic wisdom for life, which allows us to live a healthy life, if you will.
Yeah.
And all that came to be. And so, an opportunity prior to actually arriving at Georgetown, I was working for a pharmaceutical company using my biomedical science for clinical trials. And I happened to come in contact with another colleague who says, you know what? I want to introduce you to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Arthur Hoyt at Georgetown School of Medicine. I think you two could do a lot of work together because you have this passion to want to help people, and he needs someone to work with students. And that's how the education started on that trail. And the first day I met Dr. Hoyt, he said to me, you have a very interesting background. He said, hey, what are you doing right now? I said, well, I'm just here talking with you. He says, come with me. So we go down to the lower level of the medical school, and there are students in the room studying. Now, remember, I've only met Dr. Hoyt. It's the first time for like 5 minutes. He takes me downstairs to a group of students studying. We walk in the room and he says, hey, how's everyone doing? You working hard? He says, yes. This is my new associate, David Taylor. I said, new associate? We were just having a conversation for 5 minutes. What are you talking about? In my head. But I just went along. He said, he's going to actually lead you in the discussion on the information that you're presenting to one another right now on the bulletin board. I was like, you have to be kidding. What is this man doing?
Yeah. Just
And so he says, Mr. Taylor. And that's how it started. I wound up facilitating a discussion with the students based on what they had on the board, and it was exciting. Short version, he said, I need to hire you immediately. And we began to build a process of how to nurture and develop students, not just in terms of the educational skill sets, but also for their life career and what they want to do in terms of service. So there's a combination of mentoring and teaching.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. Just kind of threw
That's
it,
the short
threw
version.
it all at you. Yeah. So I kind of to that point for building that further for context at Georgetown, Dean Taylor is always having people. I always saw like a line of people outside your door sometimes, waiting to get that advice, and there's mentorship meetings and stuff like that. So with all your experience in student learning over the years, uh, what skill do you think was the most important to carry if someone wants to pursue student learning and help maybe doctors or pre-health professionals excel? It's certainly, I think, a field that's not talked about a lot, but has a huge importance and huge impact on students all over the country in different fields. But what skill set did you think was most important for you to continue that learning since day one, since that person brought you in and said, here's new associate, and
Mm-hmm.
you start doing it?
And so I want to frame it that the same skill sets I'm going to talk about for medicine actually are going to apply to a lot of different career opportunities that the students in the audience may be considering. And the first, and I'm reflecting now because in the moment I didn't realize the significance of this, but the first skill set, the very first skill set is one of understanding how to listen non-judgmentally. Listening non-judgmentally means that someone in front of you is going to share some important information they feel is important to them. And they're going to be asking your advice. So you have to listen with no filters and no preconceived notions. Listen and be drawn in by their aspirations. Now, the reason why that's important is because if you're drawn in by someone's dream, then you begin to recognize, wait a minute, they're inviting me to participate in developing their future success to accomplish their dream. What an honor. What an honor to have someone invite you in to participate and help accomplish their dreams. And the reason why that framing is so important to start with the listening and to be invited in is because sometimes we think it's us. I'm the expert and I'm going to make you great. Well, I'll suggest to you that every person that you encounter comes with a great foundation of excellence. And if they're entrusting you to help them work through a career opportunity, a career goal, and you listen non judgmentally, you can begin to see that dream and it'll create a passion in you to say, wow, I feel honored to be able to help with that. And at the end, when they accomplish that dream, my favorite part is this: I am associated with success. I didn't make you a success. All you did was invite me in to help bring out what you already have. There's guidance, there's direction, there's nurturing. And if you have a passion to want to do that, that's at the very core of any service opportunity that you desire, is to be able to listen and understand what are the dreams and to appreciate you are being invited to utilize your skill sets and your talents to help accomplish someone else's goal. So that's the first piece that's very important for longevity and to be successful in the career and education, where everyone's hopes and dreams revolve around assimilating a core body of knowledge and then being able to use it in an expert way. But similarly applies to any endeavor you desire,
Yeah.
where you're going to be engaging and wanting to develop. If you keep that as your core, everything builds from that. And then we'll look at what expertise that's unique to that career path. And of course, I did some core educational development for myself in terms of educational principles, but always be practical, right? Don't be a theory person, put theory into action.
So that's a really interesting point. And kind of to that, how do you see that integrating into a pre-med student's path right now? Because I think many students at in pre-med or just in general, they
Mm-hmm.
are always seeking out opportunities and see themselves, maybe they don't have the skill set yet to benefit someone in that way. So when they're talking to
Mm-hmm.
recruiters, doctors, deans of medical schools, how do you think it's best for them to implement, I guess, this skill set so that they can, so that it's not, I guess, less intimidating to
Mm-hmm.
reach out to
Mm-hmm.
a doctor, reach out to a dean, and just say, maybe take the time to listen, but also have the confidence to say, I can provide something for you in return
Mm-hmm.
in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? What are your thoughts on
So
that?
here's the first piece as a pre-medical student or any student in essence who's seeking advising on their career path. The first context is you have to say, I'm confident in the path that I want to proceed on. And I need you to understand that in any relationship, you have to take hold of half of that relationship. This is what I was taught. So many times we are kind of reserved. Oh my goodness, it's the dean, or it's the CEO, or it's this person, that person. You have value. That's the first thing you have to recognize. And so when you have value, you present yourself with those core talents. So, of course, we make sure we have appropriate professionalism, right? And engagement in how we reach out to someone. We make sure, of course, that our resume or CV, all those basic things are in place. So that's already an assumption, right? That those basics are in place of professionalism. But with all of that, now we know you have all your excellence in place. There's
Yeah.
the hesitancy, Josh, as you talk about. How do I now introduce myself? You literally reach out and you say, you know what? I have a lot to offer. And so I get emails all the time or phone calls that say, hi, I'm Joshua Blair, and I know that your schedule may be very busy, but may I share a brief background because I have interest in medicine? And the person will write a 1 to 2 paragraph brief background and then ask for 15 to 20 minutes of my time.
Yeah.
Now, what we have to understand once we reach out to someone, what we have to understand is everyone is not going to respond ideally the way we would want. One of the reasons why I tend to have a lot of people waiting in line or a lot of emails is because the word is out. If you contact that guy, he will actually help you. It may take some time because everyone's trying to get to him because he actually wants to help people. So it may take some investment. The second piece is your resilience to know that for every 30 contacts you put out or requests you put out, maybe you'll get 2 authentic responses, meaning they're going to actually give you something substantive and actually give you time.
Yeah.
But you have to take the first step, and it starts with ourselves and understanding that we have some excellence and we have something to offer. Pre-med student or any type of students pursuing a career, and then we have to have the resilience to do the due diligence to push. Your company is an example of that. You sent out hundreds of communications,
Yeah, hundreds of emails.
not thwarted, hundreds of communications because you knew that you have an excellent idea and it would benefit others. And so we're going to send out hundreds and see who will respond. And those who responded have been outstanding. And look at the ripple positive impact that it's had on the community that you've developed. That's what it takes, irrespective of the career. And too often, we don't feel comfortable doing that. We actually need to hear it from
Yeah.
people like a CEO or dean of medical school and know that's possible. But also understand that the realistic context is you will have to do the due diligence because everyone, unfortunately, doesn't have that same passion of trying to meet that great demand and that need.
Yeah.
That would be the most important context I would give to everyone because that starts the process. And from there, if you're pre-med, I can take it from there, and now you're going to get the advising, academic advising. From there, you're going to get the mentoring for professional development. From there, you're going to get introduced to other physicians. From there, you're going to get information on how to prepare your application. And through all that process, there's going to be listening. But your job is to know that you're excellent, prepare yourself professionally, and then be resilient to push until you get a response, irrespective of your career.
Yeah. I remember that it's certainly kind of a learning curve in that sense. Initially getting started, sending out those emails, you feel like it's a shot in the dark. But for us, it's really just shooting out as many emails as possible and trying to make those connections. And it does feel really weird at first because it feels like a vulnerability, but the benefit is certainly outweighed any of the cons, just per se. Kind of now.
And Joshua, if I may, here's a second important point that can help with that process. So we all are in different transitions. Some of us have that level of resilience, but your forum is presenting an opportunity for people to understand, one, that's important, but two, you know what? Maybe I'll contact that David Taylor guy. My goodness, the forum just put him right in front of me. Maybe I'll reach out to him
Yeah.
because I still have the confidence to do it. But you see what you've done?
Yeah.
So either we have to have someone who shared that so peers can share it and say, I've been working with X person. I'm going to provide an introduction for you. That's a way you can serve and help someone else. And that's how they now get access. Or there's this form, and now people have access. Or maybe one of us will be able to say, I'm going to send the 60 or 80 emails. No one likes to not get a response or to
Yeah.
get a response that says, no, I can't work with you. But maybe we have a little bit more resilience to do that. So you see how it can work? So there are a couple of options.
Yeah.
And now your form is providing one of those.
Appreciate it. That's what we hope to get out of it. I mean, at two of our past events, a couple people have wanted to pass on messages to speakers, and we've had speakers respond to those. Certainly great. It's just a matter of people taking those steps. So I want to get back to your service and how you've integrated into so many aspects of your life. And I also want to talk about specifically a big part, which is diversity, and also your involvement in the program GEMS at Georgetown. For those who don't know what GEMS is, it's a 1-year post-bac opportunity where students who are applying to medical schools who are from underrepresented backgrounds can apply into this program with, I believe, previous MCAT scores and stuff like that. And this program helps helps prepare you to get to the point where you can go into medical school. And a lot of students go on to medical school right after this program. And I thought it's great. And even I told you this last week, I was reading Dr. Webb's book, and in this book, he gives huge thanks. For those who don't know, Dr. Webb, he's a current orthopedic surgeon, and he came from a background where most of his family and friends were incarcerated. He was military, and he spent 3 years trying to get into med school. And in this book, he explains almost giving up. He tried to be a PA. That didn't work. So then he started wanting to apply to med school, and he worked his butt off in the book. But the one thing that was great about this program, and I think it very much so ties into diversity and the disparities that are going on today, is that this program is a great opportunity and provides a great opportunity for people from backgrounds or just conditions that put them below the opportunities of access of other people, and brings them up to the same place in the race, brings them up so that they can take on. And now he's an orthopedic surgeon, and he credits a lot that all to GEMS, and even mentions a mentor, which you being in the book. And I just wanted to talk about that service that you provide through GEMS and through diversity at Georgetown. That's grown a lot in the past years. What inspires you to do that? And also, why is it important that also young people such as us can continue to do those things? I think it's a good thing that all the stuff is presented in the news, and I think Gen Zs and millennials are going to have to really integrate this into their workforce. And heard a lot of the times companies put a diversity department almost as a PR stunt. And that's really disheartening to hear. But I'm fortunate to see how ODI plays the Office of Diversity and Inclusion at Georgetown plays a huge role in Georgetown, and also pushing forth initiatives in not only the school, but also in medicine. So I wanted to have you speak on that, since you had such an important role, and all of that comes from service. And yeah, so what really inspires you to continue to push those things, and also stand your ground, because it's a hard thing, unfortunately, to kind of push people to do sometimes, especially at a big organizational level. And Dean Chang shared so many articles at ODI of that, and so yeah.
Yes, it's very, 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 very true, Joshua. We have there's a quote that teaching is the greatest form of optimism. I think, for my personal context, I have always been a person of optimism. And if I look at the enormity of all the challenges in the world and society that are going on, if you just look at all that, you might say, "Ah," and it's very tempting to say, "I can't deal with all that. I can't even change it. Let me just achieve what I can achieve for me and my local family, and I'll just do the best I can, just focus on me." And that's almost like a selfish perspective. But when you have what I call a spirit of optimism and a spirit of service, you're always looking for what I call ways to make incremental impact. In other words, if we even visualize right now in the gallery view, right, in the gallery view of Zoom, we see all of, quote unquote, the squares. But each of those squares are actually having a humanistic context, each having talents and gifts and skills that can create change in the respective way. So it starts first with a viewpoint that I actually can make some changes, and I understand that I'm doing it in an incremental way. If I think I'm going to make it overnight, it's not going to happen. So look at my career of over 30 years. We now have hundreds, literally hundreds of board certified physicians who would have never been physicians if not for the GEMS program and how we design it and how we nurture and develop students, both in terms of their academic skills, competencies, but equally important, their professional skills, competencies, and how they want to utilize their service disposition, right? Their servant personality has to come out in terms of servant leadership. So you have to have a spirit of optimism and service. That is probably my biggest drive, because people say, how do you seem to always be up every day? How do you seem to always be energetic every day? Because each day I see potential. It's like when I see the students on here, even when I see your pictures, for me, everything has like a potential for success. I'm like, I wonder what I'll be invited to do today, right?
Yeah.
Now remember, there's balance, because if you're overextended in your service opportunities, you can become ineffective, right? So I had to learn also as a, right?
Yeah.
Now remember, there's balance, because if you're overextended in your service opportunities, you can become ineffective, right? So I had to learn also as a second important component that yes, it's great to serve, but then you have to know balance for wellness, balance for family, if you're going to have family, so that now your service time really feels great, because you've also taken care of yourself, kept yourself healthy and happy, and you're also providing value time for your family. Why is this important? Because the demand for any service is insatiable. It is insatiable. There is no way to stop it. Well, second important component, that yes, it's great to serve, but then you have to know balance for wellness, balance for family, if you're going to have family, so that now your service time really feels great, because you've also taken care of yourself, kept yourself healthy and happy, and you're also providing value time for your family. Why is this important? Because the demand for any service is insatiable. It is insatiable. There is no way to stop it. We're always going to need people helping in a broad range of areas, right? So you have to be able to say, if each one of these squares, in fact, actually think about this. Sometimes look at buildings. You see the buildings with all the glass windows, and I look at it sometimes and I'll say, if each person in that glass window took on one person and helped encourage them, pre-med student, other career, advise them, or serve in the community in some way, help build housing for those who don't have housing, right?
Yeah.
Work in lobbying legislators to change laws. That's value. Doing a telephone bank, a writing campaign. All of these are service opportunities that we can do to affect change if we believe and accept what I'm doing as an individual is being magnified collectively. And that's sometimes where we get dissuaded, because we say, well, what's my little letter going to do? What's my little phone call going to do? What's my little 20 hours going to do? It's going to do a lot, because you may be the very inspiration for someone else. So therefore, I have tried to model through the different activities that I do, both in my community, which may be serving in the capacity of building housing for underserved populations who don't have housing. I do that. It's in the domain of providing educational services for early childhood education, lending my skills and talents for those who do not have that opportunity, right? Volunteering that way, providing finance to support those type of initiatives. You pick what's important to you. It doesn't have to be 30 areas. Pick one or two that seem to resonate with your skills and your talents and your interests, but you have to have an optimistic sort of personality, because service requires optimism when there's so much challenge in the world and there's so much need. Service does require resilience. So you have to have a resilient kind of personality. And you have to see the possibilities, even in the very incremental component you're doing, which seems small. In fact, it's this whole screen. I'm one square, but based on what we're doing right now and based on what your team has done, it's already exponentially expanded. And then those valued students who are here today, they're going to tell other people, and it continues to expand. Never underestimate, never underestimate the power and magnitude of your giving of time, talent, and finance, no matter how small, because it does have, here we go again, a ripple effect.
Yeah. I appreciate the ties
I
to.
always have fun doing that because I love the name of the organization and the power of the mission. It just is spot on.
I really appreciate it. Um, so I just want to also remind people if you have questions, start dropping them in the chat or unmuting yourself. If no one does have questions or is shy, I'm going to continue to pull up questions from our questions gathered prior. I think we do have a question from Suleiman. He says, thank you for bringing up that point. There's a toxic atmosphere in the pre-med communities that you must be volunteering, researching, studying every minute of the day. That adds a lot of stress. Do you think that having less hours of service is considered when choosing applicants to accept into medical school?
Yes, great question. And I have a tendency to want to give a lot of context, but I know we have structured time. But if you ever want additional context, we're going to talk about the end, how I can give you more information, because context is very important. Briefly, the answer is yes. Quality versus quantity is key. You will hear me say we have to move away from cookie cutter advising. Cookie cutter advising says you must have so many hours of clinical shadowing, so many hours of community service, so many hours of research, so many hours of leadership. There's a formula. We must move away from cookie cutter advising and move to what I call customized advising. If I know as an exemplar, a student has an interest in building health literacy in a particular community, we're going to focus on activities longitudinally that focus specifically on health literacy. What does that show me as a committee member on the admissions committee? It shows me the depth and the authenticity of your service in health literacy. Versus, sure, I can have 20 hours at the food ministry. I can have 30 hours here building homes. I can have 15 hours over here. I did a health literacy project. I can have 80 hours over here building new irrigation systems. That's great. I see a lot of services. Which one are you really passionate about? Do you have depth? That's what I ask, because I may have, if I look at just 10 applications, I may have 8 people who've done that. Maybe 2 people have shown me 3 focused efforts, and they occur longitudinally. And I say, now I have some depth. And it ties in to their career aspiration. Yes, I want to do clinical medicine in my health literacy exemplar. Yes, I want to do clinical medicine, but I also want to create health literacy programs for the community so they can be proactive about their health. And that means we're working together as clinician and community. So we need to move more toward that. And unfortunately, you do not hear that voice. You hear, for every 1 customized advising voice, you will hear 20 cookie cutter voices. So I also want to encourage you, because sometimes you can't get this direct advice. And so I recognize that students may go to social platforms like Student Doctor Network and Reddit, where people are kind of sharing, but you have to look at it carefully because a lot of times it's cookie cutter. And we can break down those barriers by giving you context, like I just provided as one exemplar of how we should really look at service. Equally important, as you think about your career, are there medical schools that focus a lot on health literacy? Maybe I should be applying to those schools. Have I done the research on that? That's one of the things I look at. Why do you want to apply to Georgetown? versus Stanford versus my alma mater, which is the best in the world, of course, Howard University, versus Harvard versus East Carolina Medical School. All the medical schools are outstanding. Wait a minute, I heard this one's the best. Every single person is a board certified physician. When I come into the ER, I'm not going to ask you what medical school you went to. I want to know, can you help me, doctor? If my loved one is getting ready to go into surgery, I don't ask you what medical school you went to or what were your test scores. I want to know, is it going to be okay? So yes, it is true that there's going to be a context for what we call cognitives, grades, and standardized test scores. Those are important, and if we get a follow-up question, I'll give you context for that. But equally important are how we frame our service, leadership, and research experiences, and hopefully I've given you a little bit more context regarding that.
I can't emphasize more how much that advice, after you told me this last year, how customizing so important. And a lot of pre-med students see it as so cookie cutter, like you said. They think of it as a spreadsheet where they have to check off 200 hours of this, 200 hours of that. But if your interests are in engineering, pursue engineering, but you can still do it in a context that applies to medical school, going to a medical school that's focused more on technology research or integration of technology in the OR, ER, and et cetera. And I, like you said, with the point about Reddit is spot on. Just promoting this event, I saw 5 of the same questions within 5 days of, will engineering and pre-med affect my chances? Will engineering and pre-med, the same question, just formatted differently. And it was, it's really, people, I think, need to hear this advice more from experienced professionals such as you, rather than hearing it from your friend in a CS or 10 lecture who, to all fairness, just doesn't know that. So yeah, that's great advice. So our next question is from Shem. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute him.
Hey, Dean Taylor, thank you again. Okay, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, yeah, thank you again for talking to us. I just had a question. So I mentioned earlier, I'm not like in any way going towards the medical route, but if you could answer this for the medical professionals as well as like outside the medical realm. So there's like a stigma around like taking a year gap from like your undergrad going to grad school. Like I have interest in like going towards a master and like maybe MBA or masters in like a specific concentration in like technology, CS maybe. But I'm like going towards working before doing that. So could you speak more to like maybe like the specific stigma around that and how that affects like your applications when applying to grad schools?
Great question. So the first thing I want to frame for you, and again, it's not necessarily your fault for how the language comes out. I've been trying for years and sharing with students, and now you will all have what I call the language. I would like for us to change the language from quote unquote gap year, GAP, gap year, to a different form of language. And this goes directly to our colleague's point, because the stigma is the word gap suggests you're not sure what you wanted to do, right? That you left undergrad, oh, I'm not ready for medical school, or I'm not ready for engineering school, or I'm not ready for my social work context, or I'm not ready to go to dental school, whatever it might be. So I just had this gap. And that's not what anyone's really saying. What you're all saying is, I have some additional valued interests that I'd like to explore that can be helpful for the next stage of my educational journey toward my career. And I want to experience that first as a way to develop myself before I get to that next area. So I always say this, I call it, get ready, the year of professional and personal development. A year of professional and personal development. So let's say that I wanted to go to an outstanding business school, and I want to get my master's in business administration and ultimately start a tech firm. I might say this, in my application to graduate school. After my undergraduate experience, I desired to have industry exposure to the tech firm. And so I decided to pursue a year of professional and personal development. Professionally, I interned at the Joshua Blair Institute of Technology and Innovation to appreciate the real world context of what it means to design a particular product and take it from design to market. I believe that this real world experience would be essential to helping me understand the advanced theoretical principles I will learn in graduate school that ultimately must be translated to a practical context. So this year, professional and personal development not only allows me to see the practical application in real time, but also allows me to develop the appropriate personal skill sets that are essential for one seeking opportunities in this career choice. This opportunity now to pursue the master's degree will further professionally and personally develop me to receive these significant theoretical principles that I can now apply to what I've experienced practically as I develop into that business professional. I can take that same statement and do it for medicine. I could do it for EMS context. I could do it for accounting. I could do it for, I want to be a high school English teacher. I can do it if I want to be a museum historian. The same process applies. It is a year of professional and personal development that allows you to experience the real world context of what you want to further experience in terms of your educational development as you prepare for a career in that field. The framing and the language that you use around that experience, and then your passion in articulating that, man, I'll be like, admit that student to the School of Social Work, admit that student to the School of Dentistry, admit that student to the School of Medicine, admit that student right now to the School of Education to be one of our valued teachers, because they understand real life experiences and then embed that with theory so we can get great practical application. That's how we do it. You say I get a little excited about that one. That's an important one. That is probably one of the biggest cookie cutter contexts, gap year. We want to articulate more specifically how we are utilizing our time. And now think about it. If you're in an interview, if you say gap year versus a year of professional and personal development, tell me more about that. Well, I professionally enrich my skill sets and I personally develop these skill sets. Oh boy, there you have it.
That's awesome. So we have a lot more questions coming in. I just want to let everyone know, for those asking questions, it's going to be interesting prize win at the end. So stay tuned.
That'll be very exciting.
So,
and I do have a little flexibility for those who want to go a little bit beyond the time we established.
Awesome, because we have a ton rolling in right now.
Great.
So our next question is from L. Forrest. He said, do you have any books you recommend regarding pursuing your education/professional goals? How do you find mentors or other key stakeholders to promote your career?
Wow. Well, now, this is a great question that I believe will take a little reflection. Let me again give you context. Part of sharing a book selection, right, with anyone, because again, you're talking to someone who's always, I'm a little compulsive about it, quite frankly. I'm always looking to get the greatest customization. Let me tell you why. Part of my training was in educational psychology. And what we understand is that if we are very motivated for a particular goal or task, then we will pursue it with a passion. So every time I'm mentoring or advising, I'm listening. And just that question alone, this is what goes through my head. Ooh, I wish I could talk with them for about 5 or 10 minutes to listen. What are your career goals?
Yeah.
How do you think about that? Uh-huh. And as you're doing all that, I'm like, what do I have in my library that matches that closely? See, I'm trying to get as close as possible. And then if I don't have them, like, will you give me 24 hours to make a recommendation? Because I think I have something that I can locate that will be close and be more optimal for your context because it aligns with your interests. You see, I have a couple of books that are great on what we call mentor-mentee relationship. How do you, this goes back to Joshua's earlier question, how do you effectively engage a mentor? Let's say you're working with me. How do you utilize my time? How are you supposed to engage me? What are the accountabilities, right? It would be great to have a book like that. For the educators, oh my goodness, boy, you touched, so many flares went off in my head. I got a whole lot of books for you, but one of the first books would be dealing with actually social justice and education. Because the first thing we must be able to do as teachers is affirm all learning styles and affirm that we may not have all the answers. What? You're the teacher, though. That's right. And I'm teaching you, I may not have all the answers. So as part of learning, we need to explore together. Isn't that a novel twist? Because our Western culture says we do have all the answers. And in fact, our answers are better than the other answers in the country. So again, going back to your question for the recommendation, I would invite an opportunity. I would be very honored to have an opportunity for you to connect through the Ripple team and share a little bit more information about your goals and your interests so I can give you an even more informed response and recommendations either from my personal library or in speaking with colleagues or taking a look at some resources, helping you customize that better based on my experience and what you present to me. Again, that sometimes is, it puts a little bit more of a time commitment on me, but that's how I'm actually developed because I'm always trying to get the customization. So remember that every great skill set, this is just an important piece to understand about ourselves, every great skill set has a little bit of a shortfall. The shortfall for me is that in wanting to do that, that requires time. What if everybody on the call wants that? Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah.
You know what happens then? You know what I do then? I say, well, look what you've done now, David Taylor. I re-emphasize, look what you've done now. And then you know what comes out? But boy, this is going to be a great impact. Look at that. Service. Because that's how we like to say I'm wired, right? So I'd be willing to take it on. Then what I would do is I'd be saying, will you please now give me 72 hours versus the 24? Because I know that now I've expanded my commitment and have to do that. So I just wanted to frame that for you, and I'd be happy to give you some more customized recommendations in knowing a little bit more about your goals and your career aspirations, because I'm always concerned about cookie cutter.
That's great to hear. I'm going to drop at some point our emails to contact us if any of you want to contact us to get in touch. Our next question is from William Burke. He said he has a question. I'm going to go ahead and unmute him.
Yes, thank you, Joshua, and thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your time. And thank you, Joshua, for the platform. I am a pre-professional health advisor, and on behalf of my colleagues, one of the things that we noticed was a lot of students, by the time they get to us, underrepresented students, they are 3 steps behind. They're unaware of the requirements. They're unaware of a lot of the academic hurdles that they need to and how to approach them. And this was a consistent theme. And so what I did was started a sort of a support group for first year students that want to be aspiring healthcare professionals. And we're launching that this year. And I need to know from you specifically what kind of guidance you can give me in terms of principles or foundations we can build this mentoring, networking, supportive group around to give these group of students an even playing field or a head start, or at least give them that self-efficacy in terms of moving forward in pursuit of their goals.
This is fantastic. Now, first of all, I want to do something here, and I hope everyone will allow me to do it. I'm not trying to put Mr. Burke on the spot. The very fact that he's here, this is an example of a sacrificial pre-medical advisor. And in some of my presentations, I talk about they're in such great demand because you know them when you see them. Why? Because of their actions, because of what he just said. He recognizes that the bandwidth on this challenge of actually not having the right information at the right time to make the right decisions is critical. You're behind already. So accordingly, guess what's about to happen? And again, this is what happens with me. Because I see Mr. Burke's passion, I have to do two things. One, I want to be available to Mr. Burke, so we're going to connect because I would like to offer service and opportunity to present with his valued students a workshop where I will share all these pearls of what do we do, as he said, if we're already 3, 5, 7 steps behind. That's what it means to serve. When you hear that and you see that passion and you see the innovation, you want to help. So we got to find a way to do it. So we're going to connect on that. Now I'm going to give him some brief components because we really have to have the context, but the brief components are this. You're already starting the best part. You're trying to start the process early, which means we have to create the case for why someone should come to our longitudinal opportunity of peer support starting right at the freshman year. Because we have to make the case for if we are behind in the information, it will literally change, one, your ability to be competitive for consideration, but two, if you really understand the process, which we're going to share with you, it can extend the time that you get there. And so this is a common context, Mr. Burke, that I encounter regularly and why we have a GEMS program. Over my 30 years, my specialty is working with students who are 7, 8, 10 steps behind. The specialty is students who've made 5, 7, 10 mistakes already, and their prospects for medical school are looking very slim. And the people who want to work with you and still see that potential for success go from here to here. You have already shared by your vision to get in front of that you're trying to change that cycle. So what we have tried to do, both through my professional relationship, of course, at Georgetown for 30 years, and one of the reasons why I started my consulting firm that does a lot of pro bono work called Ascension Medical Educators, we are trying to help you ascend to the journey into medicine from the earliest component. We have a high school component so that you know what's supposed to be happening when you're in undergrad. And in undergrad, we try to catch you freshman year, working with you sophomore year, junior year, senior year, right into medical school, and it doesn't stop. We work with you first, second, third, fourth year medical school, into residency, it doesn't stop, then into practice. So the vision is, in essence, that if you can provide the strategic academic advising at each appropriate stage, then you can actually change the course of students being behind. But here's the rub that you see every day. Remember I said, okay, let's give it the freshman year. But guess what? In third years, you said they're showing up, hi, I want to go to medical school. And there have been either several mistakes or several things that haven't been done. So now we actually have a plan for a third year student that has not done what they're supposed to do in the first and second year, or may have had some missteps. And this is what's been developed over time, right? It is a general plan of key components that must be done that then is customized. So I need to build bandwidth. I built the bandwidth at Georgetown through the GEMS program for 30 years with other colleagues. The program is 43 years old. But the bandwidth I'm building now is with valued pre-health providers such as yourself, advisors, who see that vision and who can say, well, can we partner together and help you build up that capacity. Classic teach the teacher model, right? Train the trainer model. We provide those resources to you, partner with you, accept 2 of your valued students, show you the customization of the core plan. There's always a core plan, but then it's customized. And now you have the ability to do that with your valued students as more advisors come on board with you to take on that role. Because you and I know everyone's not doing that sacrificial service if they're behind. They'll do it at the first year, and if you don't have it together when you get second year, you can't go to medical school. They're dissuaded. I'm sorry, you can't go to medical school. You don't have what it takes. Maybe you should do history. Nothing wrong with history. So we have to spend a little time together mapping that out based on the thoughts you have, and then I can give you some more details that'll be customized for what you're going to do at your institution. But in the nutshell, it's exactly what you already know. Resources and information at each level of their journey, number one. So if you catch them in the front door, hold on to them, so we got to get buy-in. But if they pop up in their junior or senior year and they're out of the pathway, there's a way to do an audit of their skills. And if it's not there, what do we fill in? Most importantly, that's the general template. But now significantly, how do we customize what's filled in? And then we have to have a conversation with the student about real self-appraisal, because if you're in your junior year and the things that haven't been done, we may be looking at a year of professional, right? Professional and personal development, where we can get those additional academic and also professional development skill sets. A little bit longer answer, but I had to give that to the health professions advisor because there's a lot of work that's to be done. And please, Mr. Berger, let's connect, because I want to support that initiative you're putting together and give you some more details and structure in the context that you have with the plans you've already laid out. Great question. And that's a common problem. And as Mr. Burke knows, students are then shopping around trying to find him. He's just an exemplar of one who is actually trying to help students. Everyone else is saying you can't go to medical school. If we're looking at that context, that's the reality of what's happening when you do not have the right information at the right time to make the right decisions.
That's awesome. And
Don't pass me on that one, because that's in the trenches, folks.
yeah, it's great. William, at any point, if you want us to do anything to support you as well, please feel free to reach out. What you're doing is awesome, and really loved hearing. Glad that you could come to this event and ask that question. So thank you so much. And please stay in touch with us as well. We would love to support in any way we can. So then our next question is from Danielle. She says, hello, I'm loving this discussion. It's so relevant to what I'm going through. The number one thing that I want in a career is to serve the community and serve in some capacity. I love working with pediatric oncology patients, getting to know them and mentoring them, but do not want to be an oncologist. I'm interested in medicine. I think medicine is so interesting. I love problem solving and critical thinking and want to learn how to incorporate diagnostic results, physical exam, and coming up with a diagnosis and treatment plan. I'm trying to decide whether or not I should pursue medicine as a career or another field of service. Do you have any recommendations for establishing this?
Absolutely. The first can be what we call is a healthcare navigator. Now, healthcare navigator has become extremely specialized within the last 5 to 10 years. Initially, a healthcare navigator was someone who said, let me initially direct you to the points of care that you will need. So patient David Taylor comes in and maybe I have back pain, but I have difficulty navigating the healthcare system. You would be looking at my information that's been provided by my healthcare system that I do not understand. And then you would navigate me to pain medicine. You would navigate me to case management because I don't have all the finance. I need to have insurance, and they're going to help me get the insurance. You would navigate me to imaging so they could do the imaging. You would help me understand that process, break it down for me. That's how health navigators started. Now health navigators are extremely specialized and they're moving exactly in the direction that you talked about. So they are valued health professionals who may not be MDs, but had very specialized clinical training to be able to provide health information to patients. In this particular case, pediatric oncology, specifically, remember, you have multiple patients. You have the valued child who's the patient, but the parents are also the patient at that point, right? Because they love their child. And your role would actually be to expand in layman's terms what the doctors, the collective team, have said needs to be done. You're like the point of contact because the doctors, of course, multiple patients and other commitments that they're working with, and they do their best in a short period of time to provide that key information, but they can't always do that. The health navigator, sometimes also called a healthcare extender, now is trained to give more in-depth information that's appropriate, right? To respond to the questions as best you can, and usually you can answer 70 to 80% of the questions, to navigate the other 20% of the interrogatories back to the physicians and get that information and share it with the patients, to be a point of contact still for case management, etc. And in some cases, depending in which medical system you are working within, you actually round as part of the healthcare team. So you're part of an interdisciplinary team that works with physicians, our valued nurses, our valued physician assistants, other healthcare technicians, case management. You are part of that interdisciplinary team that does a collective, what we call patient care management. So that is an ideal opportunity. Now, what's happening in education, there are some universities, we probably have to have a little bit more offline conversation because it's getting customized, but there are some universities that now have a specialized master's degree track for that work. And interestingly, there are some hospital systems that have partnered with an academic medical center to develop a specialized master's degree program for certain types of health positions. So, and one of them is the healthcare navigator in a particular discipline. So we need to now look at your discipline for pediatric oncology and find out who's doing at the academic medical center level, who's doing at the graduate school level, and that could be an opportunity for you. And if you decided, though, that you want to then later go to medical school, well, great, you have a great foundation, both in knowledge and practical experience to do so, but you would not need to go to medical school to be able to do that. You're looking at usually a 2-year track for the training, another year for the sort of fellowship or internship experience. So within 3 years, you're good to go. Great question.
Great. I'm loving all the specific questions, and the people are, I guess, I'm surprised they haven't heard before because they're using a lot of context with these questions, and that's your big point. So we have, how are we on time, DT? We have 2 more questions.
Oh, we're doing great. I think I'm just getting warmed up. I'm still thinking about the last questions. I'm like, I know there's a program, but what's coming up right now? I just had a mentee who did a very specialized, it's called a neurosurgery filament. And so there are neurosurgery technicians that help the neurosurgeon put in these very specific tools when they're doing brain surgery. And the healthcare system, because it's so specialized, partnered with an academic medical center and developed a master's program specifically for their hospital system. I'm like, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's
incredible.
Yeah.
But for example, at Georgetown in our Lombardi Cancer Center, we have a broad range of healthcare navigators that go across that degree of spectrum that I talked about, from the sort of introductory, just help them get from point A to point B, to the level of depth that our valued colleague asked that question. Because that's how I know about that. I'm just trying to now look at which programs do it, because I want to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. So on to our next questions from Suleiman. He says, I have another question. I'll spare you the details, but I was forced to move my MCAT date from May 29th to August 29th due to family and financial circumstances. I'm also applying to GUSOM for the 2021 cycle, and based on the MSAR profile, you guys, like many other medical schools, see 13K plus applicants. Since medical schools are generally rolling admission, do you think that having a score come in mid-September would put me at a disadvantage when applying to schools for the cycle? Also, how do I choose what schools to apply to when you don't have an MCAT score to compare the statistics?
Great questions. These are very common questions. So let me start at the beginning. We're going to get a little customized again. And I got to give you a little context because there are some differences of opinion in our community on this. But again, I'm speaking to you from the perspective of someone, of course, who's been in medical school admissions for 30 years. And in essence, one of the things we've tried to do, for example, in sort of having joint conferences with the National Association of Pre-Health Advisors, which I'm sure Mr. Burke is part of, we tried to bridge the gap to make sure our pre-health advisors have this information too, because sometimes it's been misleading in what medical schools are actually doing. So let me speak with Georgetown because you laid out Georgetown with specificity. Georgetown does not have a rolling admissions context. And rolling admissions, I believe many people understand, but I just want to share it, is in essence, we are giving accept offers and filling the class all the way through, and it's emphasized that that's happening, right? So it's not to say that we're not offering accept offers early in the fall and early spring, but there's still lots of opportunity. We interview through February, and after February, we're not interviewing anymore. So in that time frame, in a qualified context, yes, it is important to submit your application at a reasonable time. But now let me move in a little bit. Cookie cutter advising says you need to take that MCAT as early as possible. Take it in May, get your MCAT submitted in June, because you want medical schools to see your information early. Because if you're seen early, then you have the greatest chance of being extended an interview and potentially accepted. Now, as you know, with any myth, there is some truth in that. All right? There's some truth. There is truth that if David Taylor actually has outstanding academic credentials, so that's the grades, course grades, and standardized test scores, and I have to have outstanding service, leadership, clinical shadowing experiences, and what is outstanding, that's a secondary discussion, then I might want to be submitting my application early. So let me give you what really happens. The most competitive applications in the country. What do I mean by competitive? I didn't even have this. 4.0. Every time I see a transcript with all A's, I said, wow, look at that. That was not David Taylor. All A's. Okay? All A's. And that's in undergraduate and in graduate school. They went to graduate school before medical school. We're talking about the academic style, what I call cognitives, grades, standards, test scores. And the MCAT has to be minimally in the 86 or higher percentile rank. Right now, if I recall correctly, with the new rankings from the MCAT that were just published, that's a 512 or higher. All right? Now, you're going to see a lot of averages on people's websites that seem lower. I'm talking about the most competitive applications academically, okay? When you look at their service work, remember I talked about the deep dive service? Oh, they have deep dive service. They have hundreds of hours in deep dive, very focused areas. It's not all over the place. And they have hundreds of hours. They also understand, as the most competitive applicant, if I'm not interested in being a research physician, meaning I do research that then gets translated into medical intervention, that's an MD, PhD, they understand because they've gotten the advising, I do not need 300 hours of research. I do not need 200 hours of research. I don't even need 100 hours of research. If I have research exposure up to about maybe 40 hours, that's fine as a competency to understand basic science informs intervention. Okay, I'm laying the foundation for you. So they have great advising. Those applications come in June, July, and August. Remember, 4.0, 86 percentile rank or higher on MCAT. It's a 512 or higher on MCAT. Only one attempt on the MCAT. deep dive 100+ hours in dedicated service, leadership, and clinical shadowing experiences. And they understand where they are applying. In other words, they've done the research on educational philosophy, social mission of the school, and they're able to tie all that into their personal statement and their own career goals, professionally and personally. So it's a customized application. That's the most competitive. If I come in with a 3.2 science grade point average, by the way, that's not overall, that's science grade point average I'm giving you. That's not overall grade point average. That's science grade point average. Okay? So if I come in with anything less than a 4.0 in those couple of months, 3.5, I'm not really going to be considered yet. And depending on the medical school, this is what you don't know, depending on the medical school, we may come back to you later on, or you may just get a decline. But what you see in your admission screen, you see your application is under review. What you don't know is we've already declined you, and it says send letter 45 days later or 60 days later. But you were declined within the first 10 minutes. You don't know that. The right information at the right time to make the right decision. So if I'm working with a valued student and they say, I want to get it in, quote unquote, early, get it in early, I'm looking at all that and I'm going to give you some information. And it's up to you to receive it. Now, let's say I'm a great student. I got a 3.3, a 3.5. I'm around the 510, which is above the 7th percentile rank of the MCAT, which is around 71. I'm very reasonable. Do you know if I transmit my application, if I time it such that it comes in at the end of September, October, or November, I got a great chance to get interviewed. If I've done all those other things I've just said, even though my credentials now are kind of compared to highly competitive, I'm solid. I'm in the middle of the road, 3.5, 3.3, 3.5. You know, an MCAT of about 5.12 or so, right around there, right? Or less, between a 5.07, 5.10, you'll be above the 71st percentile rank. But then you gotta know where you're applying. Did I map out all my experiences again? You see how customized it gets? We gotta look at that carefully because the timing can change depending on where you're applying and depending on what your credentials are, right? So if I've had to change something, right? I haven't applied anywhere but to change, I don't really want to apply anywhere until I know what my MCAT score is. Because that is one of the factors we have to realistically deal with. So I should not be applying somewhere or transmitting my MCAT application until I actually have an MCAT score. Why does that also make sense? Because when your application comes into me, well, this is wonderful. I got a great GPA. Where's the MCAT? No MCAT. Oh, hold. And they may never come back to you. It depends on the school. They may never come back to you. Why? Georgetown University got the most applications of any medical school for the last 2 years running. This past year, we got about 14,000 applications. Of those 14,000 applications, we used to interview up to about 1,500 people, which is more than maybe than 2 other medical schools. Most medical schools interview about 500 to 700. I think we're down to about 900 or 1,000 interview, and that's to actually see the class of 200 people. Okay, so out of 14,000, let's be nice and say that half of them are highly competitive. That's like 7,000 applications. And let's say those 7,000 all have great MCATs and great science grade point average. What makes them different now? It's how they frame their experiences. The academics were just a way to get through a gate. And we have to be honest about that. We have to know that you have these skill sets to handle the rigor of medical education. So there's a gate. So when we're advising students, we just don't do cookie cutter and say, well, your scores aren't good, so I guess you can't go. We help students understand how to layer their courses. So the courses show rigor. Did I get a 4.0 just doing 1 science course per semester? Or was it 2 or 3 courses? Can I tier it where there's a balance so I'm not overwhelmed to pull out of the boat? Absolutely. That shows the medical school I can do multiple sciences. Why? You're doing 7 science courses as a first year medical student. 7 per semester. 7. Got to be able to show that. But then when I'm on the other side and I say I want to help people, well, how have I really helped people? What's the depth of that experience, et cetera? So all those factors go into when that application comes in early. I could have great academics, but my experiences look great, but they weren't framed the right way. So many applicants, I don't think David's a good fit. I go over here. Think about it now. Georgetown's only seating a class of 200. We're going to interview about 1,000. What's wrong with the other 800? Nothing. It's fit. And are you telling me out of the 14,000, and I was generous and said 7,000, let's just say 7,000 were good, what's wrong with the other 6,000? Little something here, little something there. That's what makes it daunting. That's why Mr. Burke is saying that we can get to everyone in the freshman year. We can help you build that slowly, intentionally, and effectively with the right information at the right time. So you're not just trying to say, oh, I got to get it in because I heard that's important. Because I heard if you get it in early, you get an interview. But you actually get knowledge. You get knowledge about, well, tell me which schools you want to apply to and why. And then we have a compilation of medical schools where we can frame your information, especially your personal statement and others. You're not everything to everybody, but there's going to be a secondary application that can have further framing. But I can give elements in my AMCAS to groups of medical schools that kind of have the same philosophy. Oh, we see us here. Let's go now to the secondary. But I got to get to the academic gate first. You see how everything kind of plays together? So your question in terms of now changing of the MCAT date and will that impact your actual potential for interview? Remember, I'm an optimist. The way I look at it is like, well, first of all, you're not going to be a one school person. I'd love to have you at Georgetown. I'd love to have the privilege of working with you at Georgetown. But Georgetown would have the privilege of having you. And so would at least 25 other medical schools. So we need to focus on at least 25 schools based on your goals and philosophy and how they map up with the school's goals and philosophy. We're going to rank order those schools, and we're going to look at your competitiveness relative to those schools, not just from academics, but also with respect to your experiences. And based on that, we can then look at timelines where applications can be rolled out. And it may turn out, if you're 25, yeah, maybe 2 of them, it's good to get it in by September. But the other ones, October and November is just fine. That's customized. Cookie cutter is forcing students to make inappropriate decisions. And Mr. Burke can attest this. I need to go, I need to go. I'm going to take the MCAT now. I know I'm not ready, but I got to take it. Because someone said if I take it, I don't do well, I can take it again. Bad advice. Bad advice. Each time you take the MCAT, it makes you relatively less competitive. Because it's assumed that when you take it the next time, if you do better, it's practice effect. And then if David Taylor took it 2 times and I got the 512, but you took it once and you got a 512, human nature says, well, you did it once, so maybe you're smarter than Dave. Now, I don't want to get in my soapbox about MCAT validity and all that, but again, I have to deal with that reality. So we want to advise you, no, if you're not ready to take the MCAT, we have to move the date. If something happens, circumstances, as we said, no problem. We move the date. And then we help you understand, honestly, does that really impact? So in your case, as it relates to Georgetown, specifically, the answer is no. It's not going to impact that. It's not going to impact it. But I want to give you that full context so you understand that some of these myths about get in early is relative. Because if I'm a solid student with a 3.3 or a 3.5, and I know it's competitive, and they're talking about 4.0, and they're talking about a 5.16 or 5.19 in MCAT, I got a 3.335 and I got a 5.07. I'm telling you, if I was working with you, I feel confident. If you follow the advising and we have the other things packaged and you have excellent professionalism, etc., because I'm going to look at everything. Oh, yes, I am. If you have all that together, I am confident I can have you admitted to a U.S. medical school. Because I know the foreign medical school context too, separate discussion if someone asks. I'm confident. The question is, do you want to be a doctor or do you want to, I got to go to the David Taylor School of Medicine? Because maybe I don't have the credentials for the David Taylor School of Medicine. And why is it that schools seem to have different credentials? another conversation if someone asks the question, because every school is going to assure that you are a board certified physician. And again, the patient's not going to say to you, did you go to Georgetown? No. Did you go to Wright State? Did you go to East Carolina? All these great schools, Mama Mama Howard? They're not going to ask you that. They're asking you, is it going to be all right? Can we take care of this? And it's going to be your excellence in communication skills and non-judgmental listening, your excellence in compassion and understanding, and your excellence, yes, in clinical knowledge competency and clinical skills competency, all wrapped up, that's going to answer that in a caring way and say, yes, we are going to make it right for you. That's the answer. It's a little bit long-winded, but I need you to hear that and understand that, because the pressures on pre-med students too often are get it here, get it there, and mistakes are made. And we're trying to have mixed. So you're in good shape. No problem. I could have just said that, but isn't context better? It's gonna help somebody else. You see, I get a little excited about this stuff. That's why I'm always just hanging around.
It's great.
After I talk with students.
I was so excited about this because I knew your responses are amazing and give a lot of context to students. And I was really excited to provide this opportunity. And it's great questions everyone's asking as well. And
again, if we go back to service, I want you to think about this in terms of service. The reason why I do this is because I know that one response could literally change the course of someone's trajectory into medicine. And a quick story, I had a student, as remember I told you at the beginning, email me out, but didn't know the student at all, didn't know the student. Student emails me and says, I was looking on the internet and I came across a platform and your name kept coming up over and over again. I said, oh my goodness, but it was in a positive way. And people are saying you're helping them, and I was hoping you would help me. They asked for some advising. They were a third-year undergrad, Mr. Berg, and they were behind the curve. They were behind the curve, just like you said, third-year undergrad. I said, I'm going to give you this customized email. It'll take some time because I type with 2 fingers. Laid out an entire plan that included, actually, in that student's case, 2 years of professional development enrichment, because a lot of mistakes have been made, as Mr. Berg said. They said, thank you. And then you know what they did? Remember I told you to work with a mentor? They emailed me once a semester. I got people doing it right now, telling me how things were going. Then we got close to the MCAT. Another email. I said, well, I got someone who understands how to engage. Gives me the updates, let me know what's going on. They're following the plan. They keep the plan listed. So I'll keep giving. Got through the MCAT. Do you know when they got into medical school, they said they were applying. I said, great. They get into medical school. They email me jumping up and down and saying, I got into medical school because of you. I've never met the person to this day. And they were so excited, she invited me to her wedding. Really? I sent the gift. That's awesome. Invited me to her wedding. But wait, there's more. When she graduates from medical school, she sends me a copy of the diploma and said, this is for you. Do you see how service can plant? And just think, what drives a Mr. Burke or what drives me? When you see that outcome, that's the passion, the inspiration to stay in the trenches, despite all the challenges. There are so many challenges. Pre-health advisors overwhelmed. I'm sorry, we got to give you 300 students this semester, Mr. Burke. Make it happen. Maybe you should do cookie cutter because a lot of students. But he chooses not to do cookie cutter. He's trying to find a way to build capacity because it's so much demand. It's insatiable, right? But that's the type of thing that keeps me inspired. And what I'm saying is, again, is that teaching is just sharing information. You're sharing now with one another. Your peer network share. It is the greatest form of optimism, because when people write back to you and say, thank you, this is what happened, one at a time, this builds up. Now it's 30 years. Yeah. I haven't had my hair cut recently, but do you see this? No, I have my hair cut, but because of COVID, you wouldn't see that. And you say, man, maybe he hasn't been in there 30 years. One of my bad jokes. But that's what keeps us inspired. And so that's why I do this, because I never know. But I can tell you this, every time I do a presentation like this, it always helps someone. And I hear from people. It's great. It's exciting for me. And that's, again, span capacity, because I know demand's great. I can't get everywhere.
Yeah.
But if I can do this, if I can help Mr. Burke, one session, it could take off with the plans that he has for students. It could just take off. So what's 2 hours? I got to find a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
Service. It'll always come back to you in different ways. But I tell you one thing, you will be excited about what you do. So service means you are professionally committed to what you do, and you get gratification beyond finance. That's why service is so interesting. When you find people who are really dedicated, it has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
We all would love to have more money, but what it really has to do with outcomes and being able to say, I contributed to a meaningful outcome in society. I've actually had a purpose, and I've been using it.
Yeah. I remember it's so great to hear. And you briefly mentioned that in the past, but I've personally, I can speak on that because we've had meetings in the past. And I think even someone on this call, Nicole, I've told, after our first meeting last July, I left it and I was more excited than I ever been, because I got advice that was full of context and suited for me. And it really resonates, and I think sticks really strong to people when someone takes the time to sit down and really look at their resume, look at their background, look at their intentions and where they want to go, and gives thorough advice, and can also help them get there, and not just give them general advice. And it's almost like just a factory working, like, here's advice to you, move on next. Here's advice to you, move on next, which unfortunately, it's sad to say, but a lot of advisors are like that. But like goes back.
There are pressures and demands, and I'm very sensitive to it, and been looking at ways to try to help advisors build capacity by sharing. Like in any profession, there will always be opportunities where, I could do this in my sleep. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, because the valued mentee has pretty much done everything to that point. Everyone loves that wonderful type of student. Where the real action is, in my personal opinion, and where the real excitement is and the opportunity is when it's not all together. That's where the real work starts, and that's time.
Yeah.
And as I tell all mentees, all I ask is that once I give that time, that you hold yourself accountable for following through on the advice, because time has been invested. And now it's up to you to actualize the advice. And so, just being authentic, sometimes students don't always do that. The good news is this: because the vast majority do, then those valued students that don't always actualize the advice mean they don't always follow through, because they may be going around and getting too many sources of advice. So they kind of do some, but not everything, and wind up stalling for a little while in terms of their progress. Because you have more that follow it, you still feel inspired to keep going. You don't say, wow, I invested all that time, and now you just say, I don't want to do that anymore. No, you're right in the trenches, because it's kind of human nature. Now, what's interesting about me, and the word on the street is true, a student said to me one time, he said, you know what I found out about you? I said, what's that? That if you spend time with someone and you advise them and they make a mistake, you'll give them a second chance. I said, I wish people wouldn't tell you that, because that's part of that heart problem I have. Because I've made mistakes. And I have to always be very careful when I do the next level of advising again, because I recognize it's an investment, and my optimism says, okay, you made a mistake, Son's mistake, let's do it. But I do have people around me that say, your time is so limited, why are you doing that? You laid the ground rules out. And so remember I told you every great asset has a little area of improvement. I've had to balance that, right? Yeah. And so what I do now is that if someone's made a mistake, meaning they didn't follow the advice, they just changed it into something totally different, and then the outcome now makes the challenge even more challenging, Mr. Burke. The problem gets worse because they were trying to take a shortcut. There are no shortcuts. Now I have to say, okay, I'm going to work with you again, but I can't do it this week. I got to put you here, and I want you to be patient. I'm going to work with you, but I got to get to the people who are now first time have been waiting, right? Because you had the opportunity. Again, the demand is insatiable, so you have to make those tough calls, but they're reasonable calls given that the opportunity was there. So that's another lesson. Going back to the colleague who asked about, what are some valued resources or books. One of them I'm going to go back to that I'll probably share at the end is it's a book on effective mentoring, but it's from the perspective of the mentor and the mentee. We each have accountabilities in these roles that we have, and you can get great outcomes if we know and understand how to work together.
That's awesome. That's interesting. They did it from both perspectives. A lot of books, at least the ones I've seen, have been very much so on one-sided. It's either seeking out.
Right.
So our next question is from Sandra Rabat. She says, "Hi, Dean Taylor. I'm an incoming second-year medical student. Congrats. Do you have any advice on pursuing opportunities of service amongst the rigorous medical curriculum?"
Yes, great question. So I usually like to customize it based on the medical school. So our medical schools now have, many of the schools have what we call compressed curriculums, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, which means your time now is limited. So here's the key. Once we're in medical school, right, we've had this paradigm of service initially so I could demonstrate I want to serve to get into medical school. Once we're in medical school, the service is actually driven a little bit differently. It's driven by, I still want to give. I'm in medical school, and when I did it to get into medical school, my service, I was very authentic that I really want to do that service. But now I still want to give, because actually part of my professional development and my motivation to be a doctor, if I'm just studying all day and I can't give in some way, then I don't feel like I'm actually, developing as a physician. So we have to go back to the types of service that motivates you if I were being customized. And I'm just going to use Georgetown as an exemplar because, again, our second year, like your second year, of course, has a lot of challenging work. And then depending on when your school has you take the USMLE Step 1, there's that context. If you take it after your second year, then you're going to have limited time as you prepare for that. If you're taking it anytime in your third year, again, depending on the school, there's a little bit more flexibility. So I have students who say, I'm very passionate about investing in mitigation of addiction behaviors. And so they want to volunteer at the different community centers that work with addiction behavior. And what we do is we set a plan, because remember, I'm the Dean for Student Learning. So I'm helping you balance your academic requirements and being able to get that part of your medical student job done and have time to do some valued service. So I like to also look at what is your sort of study plan each week? What type of time does that take, right? So I know that that is done. Why is that important? Because when that is done, you can relax and really enjoy your service. What a downer if I'm out doing service and I'm thinking about, I got a pathophys exam coming up next week. But if I'm prepared and I'm on point with my work, pathophys doesn't even come to my mind because I prepared. So my first context is I want you to take time to make sure you've navigated your schedule in terms of your core requirements for both your doctoring curriculum and your biomedical science curriculum. And because as second year medical students, they also have some what we call ambulatory care or outpatient experiences, et cetera. With that said, then we go into, well, what's your passion? Some people have passion around mental health for underserved populations, which is a big one now. Some want to continue to volunteer at the equivalent of a student-run clinic. And most medical schools have that now, right? Where they're seeing patients who are underserved communities, and they go to the clinic and they serve and they do H&Ps and evaluations with a physician attending oversight, right? Some actually get to design health literacy interventions at the elementary, middle school, high school, or undergraduate level. Now, the reason why I have all these examples is because Georgetown has what we call a community-based learning curriculum, where students have over 200 opportunities to serve in the community, and it's actually part of the curriculum. So service is a core anchor, because when you look at our philosophy, we are about social justice and healthcare and empowering the most underserved communities with respect to health literacy and health wellness and health access and intervention. If I have that as a passion, I'm hoping to see that in some of the experiences for my Georgetown application. Hint to my good friend who's applying to Georgetown. Be happy to take a look at that for you. If you haven't submitted yet, I can take a peek at that for you. Go through Ripple. Now, back to our valued colleague at her school. So once we identify, right, once we identify your passion, then we can map out the time. You'll find again that I'm a little compulsive, but I always find when we map areas out, I got my academics covered. I've now made time for an important part of me, which is service. I can enjoy that. I feel good about giving back. If I'm just kind of saying, well, I want to do something and I pop out there, it's not ideal. So we need to look at what are the opportunities at your school after you map out your time that are meaningful for you. I'd be happy to engage you in a nice little listening and bouncing off ideas exercise, because usually based on your school location, there's a plethora of services and it's kind of customized within the school's community-based philosophy and engagement around giving back to that community. So, and then in some cases, by the way, I've had some students going back to some of our business professionals. I've had students who formed a business health network, the business of medicine. And they just formed a club, and their service opportunity was looking at how to look at the business structures around medicine so that those who are disenfranchised don't have either financial resource or access, they actually have a project that they bring to a community and they help implement it. What a great service opportunity there, right? Hopefully that gave you some great ideas. And again, be happy to bounce off some ideas.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank
Sorry, Sandra. Sorry, I cut you off a little bit. Okay.
Oh, no, you're fine. Just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Sandra.
I'm just curious.
Happy checking you, by the way. It's going to be awesome. You know, I'm saying that with a nice little chuckle, right? You know, you just went through your first year. You did great.
So I'm just curious, what's the club at, is it a club at Georgetown Medicine?
Yeah, that one was actually probably when I was about 16 years in. I know those students have graduated, but they called it the Business of Medicine. We now actually have, as part of an elective for our senior medical students, an elective called the Business of Medicine. So all of our graduates understand how they fit into the business climate when they're going in to ultimately practice after residency. And there are some core competencies that will make it easy for you to transition into a group practice. Some still are doing private practice, very few as you know, but either into a group practice that's external to a hospital-based system or part of a larger healthcare group that's been managed by a larger health insurance conglomerate like Aetna or Kaiser, et cetera.
That's really interesting. That's a really kind of innovative club to start up, and certainly pressing issue. So that concludes the questions we have. I want to thank you so much again, DT, for joining us today. It was a lot of great content, and it's always so inspiring to hear how you integrate service into your day-to-day life, from medicine education to business to even just in your day-to-day in your communities and doing events like these. And we're very grateful to have you today. And I'm sure I can say this on behalf of all my team. We're so thankful, and they're just gained so much out of this experience. I wanted to take this time for you to, we didn't get to touch on Ascension medical educators, but I wanted you to maybe speak to everyone about that. And just a lot of people left towards the end, so we're going to send an email out about the winner, and then I'll be in contact with you, DT, and then anyone else, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email Ripple. But I wanted you to take this time to talk about Ascension Medical Educators, because that's another huge part I'm familiar with in the video expertise. But
Indeed. If
yeah,
someone's in the video. So Ascension Medical Educators is the consulting firm that has been started by me and actually one of my former students who now is a board certified interventional radiologist. And I had a previous consulting company called Tailored Education that in essence looked at educational opportunities for students from the middle school level all the way into medical school. So both working with individual students in providing the academic advising and longitudinal mentoring, but also working with healthcare institutions, with medical schools, with secondary schools, undergraduate schools, and helping them build capacity for how to provide advising for those who wanted to enter into medicine. So my former student, we've known each other for 22 years, approaches me and says, you know, I've been volunteering and giving back to Georgetown students and other initiatives that I've asked him to contribute to. And he says, I really enjoy this, the giving back and sharing and investing in others, right? And again, I guess the service kind of rubs off, right? As I said, you model it. He takes me to lunch and he says, I'm very nervous about asking you a question. I said, why would you be nervous about asking me a question? You're a board certified physician. I'll no longer have you in the classroom. You know, you're doing wonderful work. Why would you be nervous? He says, well, because this is pretty big. And he says, would you be willing to start a business with me? And I said, what type of business? He says, I want to bring what you offer to the world. That's what he said. And he said, I want to be part of that, but I know I don't have all of those essential ingredients of the specific academic advising, so on and so forth. I can bring the mentoring and the career advising as a physician, et cetera, but I really need a partner who has the expertise, and you'd be so wonderful because you've developed me. And that's what I want to do with other people. I want them to have the same opportunity that I had, and people do not have that. And that's how the company was formed. And so we now provide the one-on-one advising, et cetera, for students at different points in the pathway, primarily starting at the undergraduate level. We do have some high school student contacts where students know this is what they want to do. And so it's always appropriate for where they are in the journey. That's what we call ascension. You are ascending up through the pathway on your journey to physicianship. And as Mr. Burke and I were describing earlier, there's information at each stage that you need to do, both in terms of your educational curriculum and your professional experiences that build what I call a credential portfolio. And with that portfolio, you now have taken all the right steps, and it gives you an optimal chance of consideration for admission to medical school. And so that's what the company is engaged in doing. And then we also build partnerships with undergraduate institutions to give, in essence, presentations to expand capacity. So when we come to a school, let's say Mr. Burke invited us, what we do is we first lift up the advisors and say, the reason why they invited us is because they're trying to expand capacity and getting the word out on a lot of key components around applying to medical school that can't be done on an individual basis sometimes just because of the sheer volume of students. And so we'll provide those complimentary workshops. We also do that for medical schools, and we also do it for hospital systems for those who are in residency. And so that pathway of professional and longitudinal development is what we try to offer to anyone who has an interest in medicine or other allied health careers. And we welcome the opportunity to work with any students here within the Ripple audience and beyond.